Last week, so Rowan Connolly, we mentioned him before, he wrote a piece for the website espn.com.au/AFL. You can find that. Talking about, I guess, the explanation of some of these stats that we go through on this podcast a fair bit. So good on you, Rowan. Thanks for listening. But sort of lamenting that it doesn't come across as well, especially in television commentary, where they might just put up a box on the screen that says, D50 transition, and then this team does it this well. And it doesn't really explain what it is. A lot of jargon. And he was sort of saying that, and I read through some of the responses to that because it got posted on Facebook and Twitter and kind of went a little bit viral. And people were kind of saying, yeah, pressure factor. I see that teams are elite, but what does it mean? And this is kind of one of the stats that we have gone through on this podcast before, but every now and then it's kind of nice to do a bit of a refresher on these sort of things for those who joined the podcast and maybe wasn't or weren't listening in previous years. So, Christian, we thought we'd task you again with explaining what it is, what the pressure factor is, how it's calculated, and then maybe we might go through some of the teams that are doing it well and doing it poorly this year.
Yep, so pressure factor is measuring how much pressure each disposal is under for each team. So obviously you can win the ball in a pack and sort of run into space and kick it. We'll look at the point of kicking or handballing at what type of pressure you're under. So we've got a whole nother sort of two people capturing the whole game based on, we've got the main capture who will capture who has the ball, and then pressure will come along and tag all the extra information. So they're actually doing things like what foot a guy's kicking with, what the intended target is, and how much pressure they're under. So all the stuff we talk about, kick rating and things like that.
So if you're forced to kick on your non-preferred foot, that's considered more pressure
No. So we're just looking at the level of pressure based on where the opposition is relative to you. So again, if you look at the pressure rating, it's basically looking at how much harder you're making that disposal for the person with that type of pressure. So we worked out, looking at 3 years worth of data when we first did this in 2010, that if you had your hands on a player, physical pressure, so whether it's a tackle or not, we explained sort of effective and ineffective tackles a few weeks ago, that just because you're slinging a bloke to ground, you might not necessarily get a tackle. You will get a physical pressure act for that. That makes it 3.75 times harder for the opposition to have an effective disposal whenever you've got physical pressure on.
So if say there are 100 disposals, a team has 100 disposals, and every single disposal was under physical pressure of 3.75, why is the number 200 or 180?
So we again, it would be
multiplied by 100.
It would be 375. So we take the decimal point out just to make it a little bit more.
So the most you could
sexier,
ever
if that
have
makes
in a
sense.
pressure factor is 375.
And you would probably never see it, exactly. You'd have to have every single disposal that you get with an opposition hand on you. So looking the other way, it's kind of surprising, but the lowest pressure factor you can get. So again, if there was a free kick paid before the bounce, and the ruckman takes it, kicks it out wide to a guy that takes an uncontested mark, and you go all the way uncontested mark all the way down and kick a goal, the opposition will still have a pressure factor of 0.75. So that's the minimum pressure factor.
75.
Yeah, so just sort of being out there.
Shouldn't it be zero?
It's again, this is a bit above my head, and it's been in there for about 13 years, but it was explained to me by a doctor of mathematics back 13 years ago, and it sort of made sense to him, so I'll trust him. But again, it does surprise me. You'll never see a team with a pressure rating of 0. If you ever see them put it up on TV that says 75,
that's 0.
then that's basically, you haven't laid a hand on them. But again, so we've got 5 levels of pressure. So we start at the top, 375 for physical pressure, 225 for corralling, so closing pressure. That's coming in from the front of someone and sort of taking away the space, so you've got to kick through someone or over someone or around someone. 1.5 pressure points for chasing, so you're clearly making someone run faster and get rid of the ball. So again, it's a little bit easier to hit your target because you've got the space in front of you. You've got someone chasing you from behind, so you've got to get rid of it quickly, but you still got all that space in front of you, so it's 1.5. And then we've got corralling pressure, which is basically you're just standing there guarding space. That's 1.2. And as I said, so 0.75 is for a set kick. So if you take a mark in free kicks, that's 0.75 pressure. If you're actually in general play under no pressure, so no one's around you, that's sort of a pressure factor of 1. So when you see the rating put up on screen, teams just know, and teams are very similar. They don't really know how champion data are collating pressure. It's up to some coaches might pay attention and sort of be across it, but some don't care how we're actually getting to the number. They've just seen that whenever they reach 200, or it's probably 205 now, that they're either winning or they're hitting they're ticking all the boxes in terms of pressure. So
somewhere between chasing pressure and closing.
Yeah, so chasing being 1.5, closing being 2.25. If you can have most of your pressure racks sort of up in that area, that's when you're talking about the scale that you see on Fox Footy. So anything over 200, 205, I think is elite on that graphic. Basically saying, only 10% of teams actually finish a game at 205 or above for pressure factor.
And that's, I think, key that finish a game. So they'll put it up, halfway through the first quarter and say, oh, they're on
They're off the
world
chart.
record pace. It's off the charts. It's like, yeah, but can you maintain that throughout the 4 quarters? And that generally isn't the case. You're not going to be. I wouldn't imagine there'd be many teams finishing a game with a pressure rating of 245 or something like that.
Yeah, and again, when you look at the whole competition as a whole, I think the leading, again, taking out the decimal point, I think the leader's on 184 and the worst pressure's on 174. So it's only 10
so it's
pressure
pretty
points.
close. It's not like there's...
It's very similar. And again, another one that sort of comes into play is a game's pressure factor will sort of almost mirror each other in the opposition. So again, Essendon are a very low pressure side, and we talked about just before about how good their ball movement is, and they're very good at getting the ball out in the open. So they're very low for applying pressure, but they're very low for receiving pressure. So if you look at an Essendon game, there's the least amount of pressure in an Essendon game, whereas if you look at the Port game, they have more pressure in their games. But when you rank them based on are you out pressuring your opposition, Essendon actually come above Port Adelaide in that. So Essendon are low for applying pressure, but because they receive such little pressure from their opposition, their differential actually ranks top 3 or 4 in the competition. So that's another way to look at pressure. You want to apply it, but you also want to win just the differential. If we apply it and they apply more, then it's no good.
But I guess that's kind of why they put it up at different points. And you say third quarter pressure, and it's like 10 minutes into the third. It's like if you have a 10-minute period where you're at 220 and the opposition might be at 170, more pressure on every disposal is probably a good thing because then you're getting more intercepts. You're taking more marks in the back 50, like whatever it might be. I get that they put it up for smaller amounts of time because you can get a sort of a microcosm.
No, I'm not having a go at that. I also think though that it's and you might be able to confirm this. It seems like it would be difficult or rare for two teams to have, in the same game, to have a massive differential between their pressure. If one team's applying a lot, it feels like it would have to kind of be reciprocated, so to speak.
Yeah, probably. I don't have the highest differentials in a game this year, but it'd probably be about 15 pressure points. So it'd probably be like 205 to 190 is like a smashing in pressure.
Wow, okay.
So it is. It's because it's a two-way street. If you're applying pressure,
the
when you win the ball
contested
back,
in tight
you're in tight. So again, and you look at sort of two parts of the game which I spoke about. So putting pressure on around the clearances. So pre-clearance pressure across a game is 259. So at stoppages, a lot of bodies around the ball, a lot of physical pressure.
Makes sense.
Post-clearance, it's 167. So again, that's where we talk about a lot of it is it's really easy. If you just had a stoppage and you lose the stoppage, you're going to have a high pressure rating because you just got midfielders there that are just reacting. Whereas if you can actually, so as I said, 167 post-clearance, if you're around 180 or 185 for post-clearance pressure, that's when you're sort of working your backside off to actually get to the space and get to the ball 50 metres out of stoppages and things like that. So again, it's probably not as high as I thought. 57% winning percentage if you have more post-clearance pressure than your opposition. 54% if you have more pre-clearance pressure than your opposition. So you want to out-pressure your opposition in general play.
Really quickly before we move on, some of the teams that are doing pressure well?
Yeah, so Sydney, again, you talk about their drop-off from last year and what they're doing well and not doing well compared to making grand final last year. One thing that stood the test of time across the last 2 years is they've been the number one pressure team for 2 years straight. So, and again, that leads to their post-clearance pressure as well, which is 171. So as I said, so slightly above the average. Second most post-clearance pressure, and they've probably worked their way back up there, is GWS Giants. So as I said, talking about when Kingsley came in, they were really about their ball movement and bringing that high handball game. I reckon the last 5 or 6 weeks, the defence, they've been one of the hardest team to score against, and their pressure is sort of going through the roof in general play. So another part of the Giants game that's taken them to the other level.